Behind the net, centers, flat, tries to Clark, shot, oh, rebound, scores! Kentucky scores for the game winner, and 12 minutes and 1 second of Sunday.
PhillySportsNetwork.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 39. Philadelphia Flyers are not too good. We'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe some good news. Here with my partners, Chef B. How are you, man?
Very good.
And, of course, from BrotherlyPuck.com, Dan, the Flyer fan. Dan Esch.
Yes, hello. I'm here.
And you have an announcement, don't you?
Yes, I do. Got a brand new podcast you can follow, the official podcast of Brotherly Puck. You can find us on Twitter at brotherly_pod. The first episode of BPW Radio is up right now on Spotify, SoundCloud. It'll be up on iTunes sometime in the next day.
Cool. Excellent. Well, we have a couple of announcements ourselves. Let's get those out of the way. The O&B Puckcast is proud to announce that we will be having a mailbag segment in most of our shows coming up from now on. Look out for us on Twitter at O&B Puck, to solicit those from you so we can answer your questions to make the show more interactive. Also, we are going to, after the trade deadline, have the fan radio call-in show. We'll explain all of that after the trade deadline, February 25th. But wanted to give you the heads up on that. That'll be the most interactive that any podcast I'm aware of has ever been. So that'll really be a great thing. And we have some other things on tap, but let's get started tonight, gentlemen, before we're joined by our guest, Russ Cohen, to talk Flyer prospects. Yes, it's that time of the year when your team's not doing well. You better have good prospects, and the Flyers fortunately do. So that's something we're really looking forward to. Just a little information here. The Flyers are 17, 23, and 6 for 40 points. They have a minus 34 differential, and they're in a fight for last place in the league. This is not good. But there are maybe pots at the end of the rainbow named Capo and Hughes. We don't know. We'll have to see how that works out. But the Flyers are 2-4-1 since our last show. And just a quick review of some personnel moves that the Flyers made since we last spoke with you. The Flyers picked up Mike McKenna. I think they got him from Vancouver after Vancouver traded Anders Nielsen, and Michael Neuwirth was hurt again. I know we're all shocked at that. Then the Flyers trade Jordan Wheel. And Dan, you were talking about this last night. He goes to Arizona for a 6th-round pick and an ECHL defenseman. Was it Jacob Graves?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it sounds like Chuck Fletcher just kind of looked at what Jordan Wheel can bring and said, 6th rounder and Jacob Graves, we're good. Chef, it seemed like Jordan Wheel was a guy that he looked good on the stat sheets. He was always on the right side of the puck, but he wasn't very versatile. Wasn't really much on any of the special teams, and the production just wasn't there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you look at his metrics, they weren't that bad, but like it wasn't like, what is it, not like 44 points in 124 games or something like that. It's not very flattering. And for all the chances they gave him, he was kind of like, I guess, especially lately, when he had his chances, he was overdoing it, in my opinion. He took a couple bad penalties in a couple of games, and then you just saw his minutes decline after that, and it wasn't even worth it. I think what they got is okay. I mean, Graves is he's 23, I think, 22, 23. He's okay size as far as defensemen go. I mean, he's not huge, but he's a right-handed shot, I think, and it's always a plus, especially in this farm system. I mean, you only have the one in Myers coming up. So overall, it was an inconsequential trade, I guess.
Yeah,
but it moved around the space. It moved around. You made space for somebody else.
Yeah, I think the Flyers are preparing to make some moves along those lines. Dan, the Flyers also announced today that they were waiving Dale Weiss, and it seems like it'll certainly give them flexibility, but there's a certain kind of air of finality about this player who, while better this year, overall has not been a good signing by the Flyers.
Yeah, I mean, he has been better over the last 20 or so games, but, when you're taking a step up from absolute dirt worse that he has been for years now, it doesn't make much of a difference. He's not going to contribute one way or another, and he's just a warm body on the Flyers lineup at this point. So, getting rid of him, sending him down, hopefully, means more moves to follow. I think they're gearing up for the trade deadline, which is at the end of next month, but, it's good to see that they are starting to weed out some of these lesser players.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's certain players that have a certain amount of utility. We hear so much the players talking about what a tight group this is and how useful guys like Amac and Dale Weiss are in the room, how they keep everybody loose. But this is the worst team in the league practically. They're in competition with like 3 or 4 other clubs to get in position to draft Jack Hughes. So you can only go so far with that. So I think that's where it's at. I mean,
what surprised? I just look at it now. Just let's clear out the deadwood, the brush. Just do it like this. Think of it as you're trying to prevent the forest fire from getting any worse. And what you need to do is you have to scrap away all that kindling, and that kindling is players like Weiss, McDonald. How the heck did Laterra get in last night? He just snuck in there and nobody talked about it.
Well, they traded Wheel. That's why.
Yeah, I know, but still, he got in a whopping minute 20 seconds in the first period. I think it was under 6 minutes the whole game. So I mean, if you're gonna, I understand if you're gonna pull him from you're gonna pull up from a roster spot, bring up somebody from the Phantoms. Bring up. Knack or whoever is showing a little bit more promise down there, get them. If this season's a wash, get some guys to get some experience under their belt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to see right now. Because, and I'll say it like this, with Carter Hart, I think Carter Hart's your goalie now, period. There's no reason to send him down. There's nothing worth bringing up. Let him get that experience. The kid, when I talked to him last night after the game, in the locker room, and the kid is mature beyond his years. He knows, he gets it. He knows his place. He knows what he has to do. He wanted to ask about getting bumped by the ref, but he's like, well, he kind of made a joke about it. I haven't been in the league long enough to say that yet. Right. So the kid he knows where it is. That's the kind of situation. You want to bring up these players now. If this season's a wash and you're going for Hughes and other people that you're going to draft next year, if you're going to think you're going to win the lottery or darn close to it, you still got to make room for those players. So those players, cut your losses now and roll with it. See what you got.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with Carter Hart. The Flyers are going to play about a dozen games against teams that could be conference final. Teams like Boston, Pittsburgh, Winnipeg, Washington coming up. And we're going to talk a little bit with Russ Cohen about that. I was hearing him earlier. He made a pretty good case how the lack of physical maturity that Carter Hart has might change your mind about that. Before, it just so happens that right now we are joined from sportsology.com, NHL, and TSN Radio as well. Russ Cohen. Russ, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. It's interesting you came on just as you did. Chev was talking about speaking with Carter Hart in the locker room last night and whether he's somebody who should see a certain amount of action the rest of the year at the NHL level, or could a case be made that it's still premature and he hasn't played a lot of really good teams before we come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I think he should, they want to put him in there for a couple more games, fine. But I think the minute Anthony Stolarz comes back, he should go down. He's just, before the end of the year, he'll just play way too many games in a condensed amount of time. When the Devils did that with Mackenzie Blackwood, he played like 6 in a row. He went on the IR after that. I mean, you can wear these guys out. He played 17 games earlier this year with Lehigh. He's playing 10 now. He's probably he is going to play against the Bruins. So he's playing with more regularity now. He's getting jammed a lot at the net like you saw with Minnesota. I mean, he's not where he would be even 2 years from now like Blackwood is physically. So while he may be able to handle a lot of the mental rigors, I don't think he should go the rest of the season this way. I'm sure he would say otherwise, but and I appreciate that. But what if he doesn't win a road game for a month? He hasn't won a road game yet. He's going to end up having a losing record on the year. If he has a couple more 4-goal games, how's he going to feel? I know everybody's going to say, well, he's fine mentally, he'll pass, but sometimes you don't know the results of that until years down the road. So I think giving him a few more is fine, but at some point I definitely would send him back, let him go try and win a Calder Cup with Lehigh.
Yeah, I mean, Lehigh's having their own struggles right now, but a lot of that's due to injuries and some of the changes that they're going through. But you were mentioning today on the Hockey Buzzcast that you noticed that there's a certain level of physical maturity that even Mackenzie Blackwood had that allowed him to hold the post and do things like that. And Carter Hart is a different build, and he's a classic case of a guy with given a little more time, he could work these things out.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Blackwood was always a physical specimen, but you could just see how strong his lower core is. And look, Carter Hart may always be wiry like a Ryan Miller, but again, if you remember, back to when you were 20, you still weren't going to be the strongest that you were going to be. And then these guys are elite trainers and everything. And just even one more good summer could make a huge difference for him training-wise. So, yeah, I just think, Boston's going to look at that film. They're going to jam the net a lot. And he's going to succeed more times than he's going to fail. But I don't know what the cost is for doing it, because it's not like they're getting back in the playoffs. He's getting a fair amount of experience, so he knows what to work for. I just don't think it's worth it to keep him up there for the season.
Yeah. It seems like it's in the category of a temporary thrill, but if it kind of goes sour, the long-term effects and the lag effects are going to be hard to tell until about 3 or 4 years down the road.
Right. That's right.
So, yeah, going to go into, it just kind of leads naturally into your article at sportsology.com, kind of taking a re-examining of how goaltenders are utilized, how often they should play. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that article was about?
Yeah, it's one of these things where I kind of, I grew up and we've learned the phrase playing the hot hand. And forever, coaches just seem to do that. Some organizations more than others. Some organizations had a number one to the point where it didn't matter if it was a hot hand. He was playing anyhow, and that's probably too much as well, especially in this era. It's definitely too much. But even if you have sort of a tandem going. So when is too much too much? Is it 6 games in a row, 7, 8, 9, 10? You know what?
Right.
And you know what's the frequency where it's just, you know, maybe you've pushed this guy too much. I had a goalie, Andrew Raycroft, once admitted to me that he did play too many games in a row. And this was, you know, back when Mike Sullivan was a coach for Boston. So, you know, even back then, a goaltender did admit to me, yeah, I'm a little bit tired. There's no question. I mean, players just aren't going to take themselves out. But again, I just, you know, like Anthony Stellaris, he hadn't played much this year. He played too many in a row. There's no question. I'm sure they won't do that again when he comes back.
Right, yeah.
So, but that's not the only team. Like I said, I just cited Blackwood. Kincaid played too many games last year. Seems to have taken a little bit of a toll on him this year as far as just how good he is. Schneider before that. So clearly, you know, John Hines does it. And a lot of teams do it. But then, you know, I spoke to Kevin Woodley and, you know, and found out that, but not all teams do it. A lot of teams do use the goaltending coach more than even the coach as far as determining when the goalie's going to play and when they're going to rest and when even they're just going to sharpen up their skills. Like he was telling me about Jakob Markstrom, even, you know, at his age now, which I want to say is 27, 28, something like that, taking a day off, sharpening up the skills, even during the season. You know, those kinds of things are good because, you know, there are times, and we'll just use Carter Hart as an example, you know, he looks like he could be good, the numbers are good, everything's good, but in reality, you know, maybe in some of these losses, all of a sudden, you know, his glove hand's not exactly where it's supposed to be, and he's not tracking the puck exactly where the way he's supposed to do it, and just these little things tail off until all of a sudden, you know, he starts having bad games. And so if they catch those things early, you could just sort of straighten them out like pitching coaches do with pitchers all the time.
Yeah, it's almost like the family doctor deferring to the specialist.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be an advance. I mean, to go back to the time when you look at the goaltenders when we were coming up in the 70s and 80s and watching the level of athleticism compared to today, the goalies of today are making more demands on their bodies than they ever have. Yeah,
they're getting rushed every play. They're facing, there's no break for them. Like in the old days, if a team was facing the fourth line, maybe there was one guy that had a decent shot. The other guys weren't really there to score, so there was a little bit of a breather time. You know, now you got 4 lines of guys that could all score, all shoot the top corner. They could all skate, so you never know when a break's going to happen. So, yeah, there's very little time for a goalie to sort of not have anything going on. And except in those games, in those weird games where maybe there's no shot on a goalie for like 10, 12 minutes, and, you know, that's a whole other thing, but that happens in any era. But, yeah, right now the physical demands on goalies is incredible, and then they still have to go and practice and stop, 100 shots in practice and hope they don't get hurt because a lot of goalies end up getting hurt in practice. That's a whole other discussion, too.
Yeah. I think,
now, Russ,
yeah.
Can I add something? Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what would you advise the Flyers how to handle this Carter Hart thing then? Because
I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not a goaltending expert, right? Like, it's not. I can't give them a plan. Someone like Kevin could, but you know, I would think on the surface, every other is a good idea. I mean, he's clearly not going to play that many back-to-back, but if you've got 3 and 5, 4 and 6, something like that, like in February, I think I counted up 11, 12 games in 23 days. I've got to play Mike McKenna more in that if he's staying here. I can't let Mike McKenna just play the back-to-back and maybe one other. Can't do it. It's just too many games against too many teams. There's no real time to rest. Yes, I know there might be a day off or two in between, but then in practice, they're facing a lot of shots. So that's where, you know, it's up to the goalie coach. I'm not a goalie expert. I just wrote about it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, and with everything the Flyers have been through this year, you would think that lesson is being driven home more than ever.
Maybe. It depends about management, what the belief is. You know, that's, again, you know, going back to the era of, you know, Hobby Bull and playing, like, I think I used the example, 68 games.
Yeah.
You know, nobody wants, or 72 games. I think it was 72 games. nobody wants to see that anymore, and I don't think you will. But coaches do get caught in traps where all of a sudden they feel like, we can't lose a game down the stretch or we won't make the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they're playing their goalie 10 straight, 11 straight, 12 straight. Then what happens when you get in the playoffs? Your goalie's worn out, and we've seen that.
Yeah.
But, that's something that happens at times.
Well, we went through that when Stolarz was here and Mason was playing all those games in a row, and Hextall just didn't have the faith in him. And if it's like depositing a little money in the bank, you get some interest for later when you need it. Right. And this is where it really bites you, So. And
it's not just the Flyers; it's a lot of other teams. Trust me.
Oh yeah. The Flyers aren't the only one. We see. Does Corey Schneider have a victory yet? Did he get? He didn't get a victory in all of calendar 2018.
Right.
And he still has never been the same since his injuries.
No.
And he was a really good goaltender.
He was, and hopefully he'll get it back. But again, it's just like one of these cautionary tales. It's, going into his UFA year now, Keith Kincaid doesn't have the same luster that he did ending last year. So, I don't know if that'll affect his salary, but I tend to think it's going to.
Yeah. There's no question. And, that's something I think that Ron Hextall certainly got right. You really do need two goalies today. Even if one guy's playing 55 games and he's the number one guy, you got to have somebody to play the 30-some games. Or you do.
The idea was right. The two guys was wrong because they both have injury histories. And Hextall would argue with you about Elliott's injury history, but at the end of the day, he still had an injury history. I know he was saying, well, it's the same hip and the same, it's like, okay, whatever. We could parse this all we want, but it was still the wrong two guys. And unfortunately, once you go down that road and one gets hurt and then the other gets hurt and you start rotating them all, well, then you're at the 7 goalie mark, right? Which I think will still climb to at least 8 probably before the end of the year. Like that's just, you can't get out of it. So the roster construction of that is really important. And that was a mistake of Hextall, no question.
Oh yeah. I was still stuck back in the Mason era, but when Mason was making his plea that you have to have a guy who's number one. But this year, we've gone on ad infinitum about this year and the goaltending situation. But something certainly more exciting. Just a few weeks ago, Russ, the World Junior Championships concluded. And there are a number of Flyer prospects and possibly future prospects for draft day at that tourney. Just wanted to get kind of like a wrap up of some of the players that were not drafted that were in that top 5 where it's possible the Flyers could be drafting depending on how the lottery ball goes. But I mean, Jack Hughes and Capo, is it Caco or Keiko?
It's Capo Keiko. It's both.
Okay.
Capo Caco. Sorry, it's getting late. Capo Caco.
Okay, Capo Caco. And these are apparently the top 2 guys, but there's also some other really good players like Dylan Cousins, not the Philly prospect, Kirby Dak, and Vasily Podkolzin, who was particularly effective at the WJC.
Yeah, Podkolzin is quickly becoming that choice for number 3, and I can't argue with folks. I mean, it is a little recency bias because there is a kid named Alex Turcotte who could be number 3 as well, and right now is with the NTDP, another center. But, Podkolzin looked really good, and he performed well as a younger guy, which, again, for Russia is sometimes hard to do. But I liked the fact that he was getting in on scoring chances. I liked the fact that he was being a little physical. He looks to be the complete package, and right now with the speed and everything else he has, there is some hopes that, he can get as high as 3. If you're the Flyers, if you could get in the top 3 of this draft, you're definitely getting a special player. But again, I know there'll be haters out there that says, oh, look, we got Nolan Patrick. Patrick's still a young guy, and he had a really good game yesterday. He's going to have these moments. I know it wasn't the greatest first half of the year, but it wasn't for a lot of guys. It definitely wasn't for James Van Riemsdyk, who is only playing well after he was called out. So I think people should give Nolan Patrick a break And again, not go back on the past where, oh, if we draft second, then we're only going to get someone like James Van Riemsdyk. Well, I mean, again, James Van Riemsdyk does score a fair amount of goals. It's just that, on the right team, he's a good fit, and when a team's not playing that well, then the fit doesn't look as good. Kirby Dach is a good player. I don't know if I want him in the top 5, though. I don't think I do. So that's something where, the Flyers are looking at it. He is a really good player, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if I'm going to go there. There was a guy who, not going to be top 10, but he played for Sweden, could be a little bit after that, Philip Broberg. He looked really good. He could be a guy that the Flyers look at. He, unfortunately with a lot of these young guys, though, you don't get a great look at them if they're underage and they're playing in that tournament, because a lot of times there's other players that are getting the lion's share of the playing time. But Broberg does look to be a good one. He's a good skater. He handles the puck well. I like him. The thing about the Flyers is it really does matter where they're going to pick. And everybody's going to say, well, we have defensemen, whatever. But, this kid is still only 17 and he's 6'3", 200 pounds.
Wow.
If right now, overseas he's got 8 points in 29 games, which is really good for a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And he did show some offense in this tournament. Thing about it is, by the time he's ready to play, which you have to believe is still a few years away, 2 to 3 to 4, certain guys will be gone, maybe even Shane Gostisbehere. So what you see there now won't be exactly what you see then. So if they're in a position where they're somewhere 5 to 10, then I think Broberg would be in play for them. I think any defenseman would be, but he's one of the better ones because he's got a lot of offense. There's a lot of guys who can puck move and such that are in this draft, but they're not necessarily offensively gifted. He's one of them. But there's been drafts that have had tons of those guys. But if I'm the Flyers, and I know fans are going to look at it and just say, we need offense, or we need a center, or we need a winger. But I really do think they have to just be open to the best player. I do.
That'll come back and burn you all the time when you're just trying to reach for a position. And if he's the best guy, then that's the guy you take.
And it depends on your board. Like, again, when I put out rankings, I'm not a scout, right? Some of these guys will go and scout a particular guy like 20 times for an upcoming draft. I don't have the luxury of doing it, the budget, or anything like that. So, I'll look at video, I'll go see a certain amount of live games, and I do my show, and I form my opinion, and I come out with my rankings. And my rankings are pretty good, but I'm not telling you my rankings are better than NHL clubs. They may turn out that way, but I'm not telling you that it's hard and true. So you have to go by your board. That's why you hire those scouts, and you look at your board, and that's what you go by. And every draft, it changes. And the fun of my show, Hockey Prospect Radio, is sometimes these guys will divulge to us, hey, when we were in that draft, and all of a sudden this guy was on the board. Wow, we thought he was going to go at like 10, and he's still there at 20, so we had to take him. And that changes everything. Like that changes then the next team's board. That changes what team 3 or 4 picks down the road was going to do. And you just do a couple changes like that, like Barrett Hayton in last year's draft, and it could turn a draft upside down.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. It was a great.
Kotkaniemi also, both those 2 picks, that changed a lot last year, and who went where.
Yeah, another part of the draft thinking last year, and getting into some of the Flyers prospects that were at the WJC. I mean, when the Flyers took Jay O'Brien instead of somebody like Kupari or Keandre Miller, I'm sure that changed the complexion of things as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I like O'Brien's feistiness. I had conversations about O'Brien with Mark Edwards of HockeyProspect.com. He really liked him. I saw O'Brien at the Combine. I thought he performed well. Injuries aside, because he's had some injuries this year, I've seen him improve speed-wise. I do like the drive to the net and the shot. Maybe there were better guys on the board, but if they liked him, that's fine. There were other teams that liked him as well. I didn't see him in any of his prep games, I had seen him at like the All-American Prospects game and something else. And so that's what I had to go by with him. And I thought he was pretty good. The Flyers thought he was better than that. And they could be right. And so, that's where, we'll wait and see. But, after what I saw, what he looked like when he came into rookie camp and left rookie camp, I was pretty impressed with him. As far as, him not playing enough, for the World Juniors, it happens.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Flyers after development camp, their brass was saying that in the long run, O'Brien might have more upside than Farabee. I doubt if they're saying that right now, but
yeah, I don't think they're saying that anymore.
No,
and I wouldn't have said it then either. I was very high on Farabee because I felt like there was something special about his shot. Now, I think he's a really good skater. He could be a little better. I think his hockey sense is good, but I think it can improve. I think his 200-foot game can improve. There's things that definitely can improve in his game. His strength will help a lot when that improves. But I was really high in him, and I was all for the Farabee pick, but I think Farabee's better than O'Brien, and I always will. That's just me. So, again, teams, different scouts, different scouting directors will always, have different opinions about it. And it's not a one-year race. We won't know for a good 4 or 5 what the real answer is. But, yeah, right now, this moment, Farabee does look better.
Yeah, Farabee's game, you just see that if you add the strength and if it correlates with other improvements that would go with that, it would be a nice addition. You could see a shot getting better, a better first step, more acceleration, and a lot to be encouraged by what we saw, what we've seen so far, even at BU.
Yeah. Yeah, now, if you're a Kings fan or the Kings brass, Kupari looked great, right? So, this moment he looks better than O'Brien, but that could change too. Yeah.
No, he was definitely a guy I was interested in. Does he look like Jeff Carter to you, Rasmus Kupari, kind of like a similar player?
Carter was different. I mean, and Carter really, it took a while for him to sort of mature as a player, but I think, and Carter did become a really good defensive player. I think at this point in his development, Kupari is a stronger defensive player, but Carter eventually got there. I think Carter has the higher offensive side, but Kupari's skill level is real high. I just don't think he'll ever get the amount of goals Jeff Carter got in his, in his height. But I think point-wise, he'll be pretty close to that.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, that's a good player. Another player who really is not only doing well in juniors, but shined at the WJC, of course, was Morgan Frost, who's lighting it up in the OHL with Sault Ste. Marie. What impressions did you have?
Well, I again, was pretty impressed with him pre-draft, spoke to him a lot at the Combine, thought the Flyers might take a run at him. They did. Speed keeps getting better, strength keeps getting better. The hockey sense is there. He's got a great shot. He can motor through the crease and just foul up a goalie. He was the top scorer for Team Canada, yet they didn't use him to start the overtime, which was ludicrous.
I know.
But sometimes these things happen, and you just, you look at some of these coaches, and you don't understand it. And but it's like an all-star game, and they go with what their gut tells them, and I don't know why it would tell them that, but I thought Frost did himself proud, the Flyers proud, the fans. I thought he had a great showing, and he definitely could be a top liner. I still don't think I would want him up with the big club next year.
No.
I do think there probably is a few more pounds of muscle that I'd like to see on him. Maybe we'll see it before he starts camp, and I'll change my tune. But right now, I think I would rather, wait. I know people are like, well, he's dominating juniors, but you know what? He can dominate it one more year. I would like to see him when he's up just be, pretty close to what he's going to be, rather than if he comes up next year and this team hasn't made all the moves that we think they were going to make, and it doesn't look like they've made a big jump to get back to being a playoff team. I don't know if I want Morgan Frost there for that, because then you're putting him on a top line or a second line for that, and you have a lot of expectations out of a very young player. So we'll see what happens over the summer with him.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see at a pro level. for him to prove he can play at a consistent pace, because that's been something that people have been, pointing out as an area for improvement for him.
Yeah, and that's a lot of young players. It really is. That's something I hear frequently on my show from scouting directors and such. And consistency is huge. That's what makes NHLers great.
Yeah. One other player that was notable at the WJC for Sweden was a surprise starter, Samuel Ersson.
Yeah.
Drafted in the 5th round last year.
Yeah.
And he surprised, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I knew a little bit about him pre-draft, not a ton, and then they drafted him, and I watched him like a hawk in rookie camp and development camp, and I really was impressed. Like I watched him and I was like, wow, this guy has very smooth motions, great glove hand. He's able to snare pucks far out of the net because he's got a long reach, and as you can grab pucks in traffic like that, that really cuts down on deflections and just pucks hitting off of bodies and going in weird ways as we see in hockey. That's sort of like a new thing that goalies, if they can do that, it sort of breaks up a play quickly. He's able to do it. Now, I thought they were going to go with Ole Eriksson Ek and net. I happen to like him. They didn't. But I knew Ersson would be good. I didn't think he'd be that good. In the end, it wasn't his fault when they didn't advance. I picked Sweden to win it all, but it's hard to prognosticate that tournament. I mean, because everything was so close. Like Sweden scores a couple goals there, Ersson may have taken them the whole way to win. Everything was that close. Same for Canada. Same for all the teams that really lost. Any of them could have won. So I felt like this year was just that close. But I really did like Ersson. I liked the fact that they had that much confidence in him. The Flyers have a wealth of goaltending right now, and it's not going to last forever. So if they traded one or two of those guys to get some currency going, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, you can't hold on to 4 or 5 in your system, that's for sure. So at some point, is it Ersson or Sandstrom? Which one of them is going to go? Which one of them is going to be a backup? Which one of them? You have to look at those kinds of things. Look how long St. Louis took to call up Jordan Binnington, who had all the talent in the world. And, now he's won 3 in a row, but he's 25 years old because they kept wanting him to get starting kind of time in the minors, but yet they kept using Jake Allen. And, now that it seems like they've moved on from Jake Allen, he's finally getting his chance, and he looks great. He is 25, which is fine. Sometimes goalies actually peak at that age, and that's when it really starts to click. So that still may work out well for them, but that's not the ideal situation. But they also had a shared affiliation, right? I mean, those things are rough on goalies. And, he basically said one year Pennington just sort of woke up in the ECHL and he was a little bit shocked. And it happens. It happens more to goalies than anybody. And, go ask Jonathan Quick. He played for Reading for a little while. So,
Yeah, they couldn't wait too much longer. It would have been Bennington Van Winkle or something.
Yeah.
But his career was going to go by. Just a quick hit on Noah Cates. He seems to have the head for the game, but I wonder if he has the physical package to be an NHL player.
You know what? I think he'll get there. I saw him a couple of years ago in the USHL kickoff tournament. I felt like he looked good. He was pretty smart. He is a smart player. He's good around the net. He's got a good shot. I mean, Jack Hughes made that play by sort of going and drawing 2 or 3 players on him to get that great pass to Noah Cates. But Cates still had to bury it, and he did. And so I do think he has the physical package. I don't know if he's a top 6 guy when and if he gets to the NHL. He might not be. He might be one of those top 9 guys. But I think it was a good pick, and I do like him. And I do think there is something there. It's hard to pick, it's hard to draft high school kids. Nowadays, there's been a little bit more luck with them, but I remember going back to the Blake Wheeler draft, and I was just like, boy, this is such a big dice roll. Or you go back to, Jankowski.
Jankowski, yeah.
That was a dice roll. But, those 2 have worked out, and so I think teams have gotten a little more daring, where before that, years before, if you took kids out of high school, a lot of them didn't pan out, and maybe because the competition just wasn't what it is today. So, I think it's still a little risky, but I'm surprised you actually haven't mentioned, Jack St. Ivany. they got him. They acquired him in a trade. He's a defenseman. He looked really good in camp. I thought, wow, this kid's a developing kid. I had seen him. I went back and looked at old notes from an All-American Prospects game, and he was on my radar then he sort of fell off it, and now he's back on it. He's definitely got offensive ability. The skating's good. I felt like the U.S. team used him a fair amount. I thought he had a really good showing, and now this is a guy who you hope signs with the team. Like, that's one where even though they acquired him, doesn't mean he's not going to go see what other teams are interested in him and see, just what kind of bonuses he can get or playing time. So when the time is right, and I don't think it'll be this year, but it could be next year, if St. Ivany has another year like he did this year, where he's sort of on the radar, they're going to have to, try and make a decision about him too. But I think that's, it's good depth to have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt. The reason I didn't ask about him is the Flyers seem to have a surplus of guys, if you could call ever having enough prospects. But, two guys that come to mind that might be ahead of him would be Linus Hogberg, who's in Sweden, and also what might be a real find in Igor Zamula.
Yeah, I liked Zamula in camp. There's no question that he does seem like a find, and he showed a lot. I didn't know a lot about him. I saw some strength. I saw some scoring ability, and so just some pretty good plays in the corners. So I agree with you on that. Hogberg is an interesting one because I know he's got okay numbers over in Sweden. In international competition, it's been up and down with him. I'm not sure yet. And, again, Sam Morin, maybe in February we're going to see him. We'll get an idea of just where he is. We really don't know because he wasn't really quite at NHL level before the injury. Now we really don't know again. And so they'll definitely test him out at the NHL level, and we'll see. We'll see if he's able to cover both sides because he couldn't do it at the beginning, and then he was starting to be able to do it. Is he still just fast as a straight line skater? Is he fast at all? I don't know. Like, none of us know. And that's so Sam Morin could drop on the depth chart, or he could be slid right in. Like, that's something where you just don't know where that's going to end up. And I'm pretty sure after this year, there'll be some changes made to at least one or two of the defensemen on the roster. So I don't know if you could have too many. I think it's fine. I think it'll work its way out with attrition.
Yeah. I think with Miranda, he gets a conditioning assignment where they give you 10 days, 2 weeks.
Yep.
All right. So then they have to worry about a waiver claim with him.
Right.
And, number one fan happens to be on the line, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. He has a whole site devoted to Sam. But so he's hoping. I mean, in all seriousness.
Sam's a great kid, but he did have a few shortcomings that I felt like were coming along, but that was pre-injury. Now I'm going to be watching him with fresh eyes again.
Yeah. It's almost like he's got to start and like, how much did you lose that you had already gained?
Right.
Yeah. So but I do anticipate there could be some changes with players like possibly Haig or Gudas, and maybe Morin gets a look-see. We'll see how that works out.
Actually, I don't think Gudas is going to change. I think now that they want to stay with the rough, physical, hard to play against kind of team, that I think Gudas stays. I think Hag's had a really good year, so I think he's built up currency, but could go. And we, based on the changes, putting Voracek at the point and putting Gostisbehere on the side, it seems like they're doing all they can to keep Gostisbehere and take a little pressure off him. So they may still be hesitant to move him. So it might be Hag that actually is the guy that gets moved. I mean, could Sanheim get moved in a bigger deal? Maybe. I mean, that is possible too. He's had a good year, so he's built up currency too. So it'll be interesting. Like the deadline, depends who's out there. Are they going to try and go as high as somebody like Subban? If they do, then Sanheim might be in that deal. All depends. I mean, I floated a deal that if really Nashville was going to think about trading Subban, that might be the only way you could trade Voracek because the salaries are close. And then, put other guys in the deal. But I don't know if that would happen in season or if it would happen, during the summer before the draft.
I would think
or on draft day,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think with as they're presently constituted, if they probably need a center more than anything with the kind of production they're getting. That's the only weakness I see in that team.
Yeah.
But
you're probably right.
Yeah. Maybe they want a guy like Simmons, but I don't. Instead of Ronaldo, he's not going to do any good in the playoffs if he's doing any good.
I don't tell Labby that he loves Ronaldo.
I don't get it, but he can stay up north south. That's about it. But
just penalty kills. Don't forget the penalty kills. Anyhow.
Now, we all know that we were walking on eggshells when you were talking about Sam Moran because we were waiting for Dan, But question is, one of my favorite prospects down there is Isaac Ratcliffe. What do you think?
No, I'm real high on Ratcliffe. I thought he was a first round talent. I was surprised that he slid a bit. I guess teams felt like he needed work with the skating, which clearly he did do. I don't know if he worked with Barbara Underhill or not, but something changed in his skating, and so last year's camp was even better than the year before, and I thought he was good in the year before. I always felt like he had moves of a smaller guy, even at his size. He's a great teammate. He's smart. He's got a great shot. He could show some physical aggression. Like he is that power forward that I'll wait for a long time for. So like if he's not ready for another 3 years, fine. I don't care because the idea of having a guy like that in the lineup and could be a force on the ice, I'll wait for that. And, maybe that's a guy you match up with Couturier, and then all of a sudden you got a fast, big line like that going.
Yeah.
That's good. Like everybody, loved the Legion of Doom line, but they wouldn't be fast enough for today. Lindros would, Leclerc wouldn't, and Renberg right on the edge.
Yeah.
But with those two, they would be fast enough, and then it wouldn't matter who you put as the other person on that line. So I really do. I do like him. I think his shot has improved, and I think that was one where that was smart to get him what they traded up to get him, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was smart.
Yeah, and his numbers are probably going to do a moonshot now that he's with Nick Suzuki, who's a Montreal prospect.
Yeah, he already tweeted out a picture with him and Suzuki, and Suzuki is so high skill that, he's going to get some numbers.
Yeah, it looks like Montreal's center problems are going to be solved pretty soon between Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. I think they're going to be okay. It might take a couple of years, but that's a good get out. That he was Ratcliffe was the next. If you don't mind, just a couple more guys.
No, I'm fine. Yeah, keep going.
The fans love it. I mean, we're honestly, Russ, we're just eating it all up because there's just so little to root for this year.
No, I get it. I mean, I'm appreciative. When I started Sportsology, it was back in 2000, and my first draft was 2001, and I decided that was something I really wanted to sort of focus on was the draft and the young players. I always had a fascination. So then, we ended up getting into Hockey Prospect Radio when we were at like 13th year or 14th year, I forget. And when we first started, we would hear things like nobody cares about prospects, which was true at the time.
Right.
I have pictures from 01, and I'm standing in front of like Dan Blackburn and there's like 4 people. And I'm standing in front of Stephen Weiss, and there's he was the home guy, and there was like 5 people, and
yeah,
and you fast forward to now, and there's like 30 people, sometimes more if it's Austin Matthews. And so it makes me feel good. The cap world changed things. There's no question that when that happened and teams started falling out of it, fans definitely had to start boning up and learning about their prospects and having an interest in it because, now some of them were getting to the NHL, getting a few breaks a little quicker because, teams were capped out, and so that they would sort of look for that. And so, that sort of makes me feel good that it, down the line, it had become a little bit more useful. So I appreciate it.
No, that's terrific. One guy who people are really wondering about is a little bit of a mystery. He's been injured. Wade Allison is at Western Michigan.
Yeah.
He's just coming back after an ACL surgery and kind of taking their time with him.
Yeah, and I think that's smart. I like Allison as a guy. I know people want to compare him to Hartnell. I don't compare guys to anybody. I'm just that guy who doesn't believe it. I always think, if you're going to try and tell me, I remember even back in Rick Nash's day when I was at that draft, well, he's the next Mario Lemieux. Well, you know what? He wasn't, but he's really good Rick Nash, 400-something goals later, really good player. But don't say he's the next Mario Lemieux. Don't tell me someone's the next Gretzky. Don't tell me. And I never want to hear that. But as far as Allison, I did get to see him a couple of years ago in the playoffs, and I was a little up and down with him. I thought the skating needed work, but when he got there, he really did make things happen, especially in the corners and around the net. And I felt like even the skating had improved before the injury, and he was on the right path. I do feel like, for whatever reason, the organization was going to rush him into the AHL this year. I thought maybe that might happen, and I'm glad that it didn't. And now it's probably better that he's still at Western Michigan, because I just feel like, post-injury, it's better that if you're with, no offense to the Phantoms, but if you're with a college team, there's more staff available all the time for singular players like that, rather than a big team like Lehigh, they got to go on the road and everything else. A team like Western Michigan's only traveling on certain weekends. So I think it's better for him to sort of recover that way. I still have hopes of him being an NHLer. I don't think he's the next Scott Hartnell, but I do think he could be a real good, useful player. So we'll see what he looks like. I am anxious to see what he looks like this year too. Yeah, I haven't seen him this year.
Yeah, he's a bigger body, become more of a heavy presence, good straight line skater, and a very good shot.
No, he has an excellent shot, and he has a will, and he definitely has aggression, and so there's things there to like, and I think he's in a good spot right now college-wise, and so it really just depends, what he looks like post-injury. Those kinds of injuries are easily recoverable now, so I expect him to, but I've been in this business long enough to know that you get dinged up a couple times, it definitely sets you back and does change sometimes the plans the team has for you, because then all of a sudden they want to take it a little slower, and I get it.
Yeah. And the thing like you mentioned about college, not only has a lighter schedule, allows him for more time for rehab, and he gets the attention that he needs that in the hustle and bustle of the AHL he might not get.
Right.
So let me say his name right. Is it Wyatt Kalinick?
Yeah.
From Wisconsin. Is he a surprise how he's produced?
I think so, and I haven't even seen him enough yet to really comment about him. But I saw him a little bit, and I do think so far it's a surprise. But I even need to bone up on him.
Yeah, I just give you numbers that don't really mean much, but in 20 games at Wisconsin, this is NCAA. You don't have the scoring that you usually do in like juniors. 7 goals, 16 points. So
that's big. Those are big numbers. I mean, so I haven't seen any Wisconsin games this year. I'm sure now after the break has happened, I'll probably get a chance to and see him in action.
Yeah. So it's is he a right-handed shot?
Left.
Okay.
He's left.
Left. Okay. Thanks. Appreciate that. Because I have these notes here, and they're all a lot of scribbling here.
Got to be able to read your notes. Come on.
That's it. That's the problem.
I run into that too. Actually, it was really funny last year after the draft. Anthony Mingione and I, we do Off the Post together and with Michael Jello, but we were sitting in the airport waiting, killing time, and I had my notes out from like the under 18s, the 5 Nations, and he's like, look at that scribble. He goes, can I tweet out some of those photos? I'm like, sure. So then people were trying to read my scribble, and I have trouble reading it sometimes as I'm writing things down during the game, so like I get it.
Yeah. It's one other prospect that's amateur still right now. He's a Hobey Baker finalist possibility, Tanner Lazinski at Ohio State. But the Flyers haven't signed him yet. What do you think of his prospects, and what do you think of the possibility the Flyers might make a deal with him?
I think he's a tremendous player. Like a couple of years ago, I was like, let's see what he does in the World Juniors, and he really impressed me. He impressed me with the season. I covered him in the East Regionals. Those were up in Lehigh. He was great. I asked him about the Flyers. He didn't want to talk about it. I knew he would come back terrific this year. What's his numbers this year?
19 games, 7 goals, 20 points.
Yeah. He's a stud. Last year in games, he was taking over games. Like even when Ohio State was looking a little flat, he wasn't. He's excellent on faceoffs. He's good defensively. He's very strong. He is physically strong for for any league. Like, he's a guy, because Ohio State does have an elite university there and training facilities, he's taken full advantage of it. I know there are people out there that don't believe he could play center at the NHL level. I do believe he can, and I do believe there'll be a market for him. So I would have to hope that the Flyers are going to give him some serious discussion and tell him, look, I know you see Phil Varone right now at that 4C spot. You sign with us, we'll give you a chance, or we'll give you that spot, and let's see what you can do with it, kid. And so I would hope that conversation happens, but sometimes it's up to the player too, and he might just want to see what's out there. I got no indication whether he would or he wouldn't, but all I can tell you is he didn't want to talk about the team last year. I don't know what that means this year.
Yeah, and you have to wonder.
I mean, he was focused on the playoffs. I mean, you have to appreciate that. But he was playing close to the home team of the Flyers, and he stayed far, far away from it, if that's any kind of indicator.
Well, yeah, and wondering if Chuck Fletcher might be able to get his ear more than Hextall, or it could have nothing to do with that.
And that's possible, and that's something where, they may have already tried to do that, or may try and do that down the stretch here.
Yeah, Chuck Fletcher has quite a job ahead of him.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not an easy job. I feel for him because the job has gotten worse since he's taken over. It's one of those things where they thought they had one kind of team when he took over, and the team just aged horribly in the last month, and now the job looks even harder.
Yeah, that's they turned into Frankenstein, more or less.
Yeah.
With that comes the promise.
Yeah, it's your job to paint a happy face on that now. I don't have to.
Yeah, well, of course. That's what we do with the O&B Puckcast. But we do get people excited because in the last segment with you, Russ, we do have some phantoms that are likely going to see significant time in the remainder of the second half of the season here. And I'm wondering if Phil Myers, Nick Aube-Kubel, and Mark Friedman are really ready to see time.
Well, I think Philippe Myers is. I mean, I saw him about a month and a half ago. I thought he looked great. I think his skating's really good. He's a smart kid. He's physically gifted. He definitely has offense in his game. I know the offense isn't jumping off the charts in Lehigh, but that's okay. Those kinds of things will come. It might take him a couple of years like it did Sanheim, where Sanheim last year was only scoring at home games, if you remember. So Whatever. I mean, there's always quirky things that happen. Usually they have to feel good about their defensive game first, and I think he will. So I think that's something where I've actually been kind of surprised he hasn't been called up yet. I would have called him up already. As far as Friedman, I think I'd have to call him up and see what he can do because he is physically strong and he is fast. He's really good at puck retrieval and he's smart. I don't think you're getting much offense out of him, but you are getting a puck mover who, I think has pretty good hockey sense and can definitely get up the ice. He is a little smaller, I get it, but he is strong, and I think he can handle himself in the corners. I don't think he is an everyday defenseman, but I do think he's a guy that could play for stretches. So could he be like your 7 that you carry around? Yeah. Or, once in a while he's in Lehigh, and then he's up for a few weeks, he goes back down, guy who ends up like on a playoff roster when you have the team. I think he could be that guy. So I'd like to see him get a chance, too, so they could at least evaluate him and see where he's at. Aube-Kubel is an interesting one because everybody was sure he would get a chance, and he did, and then, got sent back down. I think he'll get another chance. I don't remember. How many games did he play? It wasn't many.
I think he played 4 or 5 games, I forget.
4 or 5, yeah.
And he wasn't even seeing significant minutes in some of those games.
No, he got lousy
minutes.
Let's be fair. He got lousy minutes. I mean, Hextall was
and that was the coach. That was the coach at the time. So
Hextall was burying him.
9 games. Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
9. Wow, yeah, it's even more. But he didn't get significant time, and he didn't really get much opportunity. I'd like to see him come up and see what that can bring. I think he's improved as a player. I think he's stronger. I think his two-way game is pretty good. I don't know what his offense is going to bring, and that's where they need to find out, and they need to play him with some real guys just to sort of see if they could spark his offense. Because if he's going to come up but he's not really good offensively, then, you have Michael Raffl already. You don't need another one. And so that's where I think they're at with Aube-Kubel right now, but I do think he should get a look. I mean, now with Dale Weiss going down, you'd have to believe he'd be coming up or carrying another defenseman. So let's see, what happens with that.
Yeah. And the thing is, Fletcher's got to make room for some of these guys. And like you
Well,
said,
I think
with
Weiss
Weiss,
going down has made some room now.
right. And they clear out Wheel. Laterra cannot be long for the team.
He played yesterday. I don't know.
Oh, don't even remind me. He got a minute 20 in the first period, and that was it.
I know. He played, though.
Is there some kind of legal thing where they're afraid to let him go with him under, going through the legal thing?
Well, you can't really let him go. I mean, you could bury him in the minors, but you can't let him go. You got to pay him till the end of the year because and look, I am not a legal mind, but from what I gather in the case, it's that they're not going to send somebody over here to serve papers, so because that's just too much of an undertaking. So they're going to wait until he goes back home, and then he'll go on trial. So in the meantime, you can't just kick a guy out when there's no due process. So he's going to get paid one way or the other. So I guess maybe they're trying to work up his trade value. I'm not sure. I really don't know.
Or let him earn money for a really good lawyer.
Right.
Well, this is the first time I think I've heard of a guy being on the lam by playing in the NHL, but we'll have to see how that works out.
Yeah.
Mikhail Vorobiev, a compete issue probably in terms of consistency. Is that squared away that you're aware of in the AHL? Is that
I'm
still
not
an
aware
issue?
that it's squared away, but I do believe he'll get a look and should get a look. But it's probably going to be as a reward, so that may take a little while. But maybe in the next few weeks or month, we'll see that if he does show consistency down there, because there's some things to like. I mean, I covered him in the World Juniors where they lost to Canada but looked really good. I think he is a talented guy. He's fast. He's got a good pro body. Doesn't always use it physically. Doesn't always play the 200-foot, and I think that's part of it too. But he can make things happen in the offensive zone. I don't think he's a gifted scorer or anything, but I think he's a good playmaker who can score a bit. And so he could be a good, interesting piece, but I don't know if he's too young right now, if he's not handling it well mentally. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's going to be up to him. All a team can do is draft a guy and try and do the right things developmentally wise, but the player has to do his part too.
Yeah, he went from 60 to 0 real fast, and
yeah.
A lot of people complained when he got sent down. I wasn't complaining. I said, you just can't disappear like that on the ice.
Right. And then, there was consistency even down there. So then it's like, yeah. But I do believe he'll get another shot.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Russ, I don't know what to say. It's just really been fantastic to get your viewpoints and your opinions about some of these players, and we're all better for it. What is going on besides being everywhere with hockey and Off the Post and the Stick to Hockey podcast and a Hockey Buzzcast? What anything that you're promoting right now in addition to everything else?
Yeah, we're going to do a live show at Xfinity Live. I believe it's February 3rd. There's a game that day, and then afterwards we're going to be on the stage at Bullies. And so there's a bunch of us. Anthony will be there, and Jason's running it, and Gritty will be there, and I think there's going to be a former player or two and some more writers. So that should be a lot of fun. Still, people can check me out at Amazon.com, and I do have a Flyers book called Philadelphia Flyers Images of Sports. It's a photo book. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of interesting photos that a lot of people haven't seen, behind-the-scenes stuff, fun stuff. There's Boucher wearing like a Santa beard, which is funny. There's some good stuff there, so I think people will enjoy that. Some good stories too. So they could check that out. Right now, sportsology.com is good. I always put up hockey content. I will put up more and other stuff. There's other sports. There's entertainment. I'll put it all up. I interviewed, I want to say her name is Melody Schofield, who is taking part in the Titan games, but hasn't gotten the TV showing just yet.
Oh, okay.
So people can read about her. She's a local Philly person, and I'm rooting for her, so we'll see. So, yeah, always a lot going on. Maybe I'll get out to the Five Nations in February, and I'll definitely be at the Combine and probably a few more Lehigh games before the year's out, and maybe a few more junior games too.
Oh, that's terrific. Just on the event, because I know it's important at Xfinity Live. That would be February 2nd. Is that the Edmontons?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, right. Just wanted to get that information out there for that particular confab.
Yeah, Jason would kill me. But yeah, February 2nd. Yeah. That's right.
I wouldn't let you go without getting the right date out there.
No, I appreciate it. And I do want to let people know I have a gritty gift for them. If they follow me at Sportsology either on Instagram or Twitter, while supplies last, I will be giving out a gritty gift for everybody that sees me. So for as long as they last.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, Russ, thanks so much, and I hope to have you on again soon.
Anytime. I appreciate it. I had a good time.
All right. Always a pleasure. I guess Russ and I hogged the whole thing there, but I
jumped in. I wanted to make I was very curious of what he had to say about Big Rat, because he's obviously tearing it up in the OHL, but he's playing with some good guys there. So I just wanted to make sure he's going to be something to look forward to. That's all.
Yeah, no, he was on my list. I have a whole list of like 15 guys, and he added a couple people. I can't believe we got to all these guys, and he had the time to because he is everywhere. He is hockey ubiquity. He's like on TSN, and I don't need to advertise anymore for him. He's go to sportsology.com, and Russ really knows his stuff and has some very strong, well-informed opinions. And always remember, Russ talks to scouts, executives, and things like that. So he forms his opinion in a lot of different ways, not just by watching these guys. So let's talk about the Flyers, right? Dan, are you still there?
I'm still here.
I know you want to talk about the Flyers loss to Washington last week, 5-3. Why don't you tell us all about it? I'm only kidding.
It was funny. It was when he started mentioning Sam Moore, and it got eerily quiet by all three of us. I'm thinking, oh my God, if he says anything remotely bad about Sam Moore, Dan's going to go through the phone and get him.
I was ready to defend him. Don't worry.
But
I know you were.
He actually said some things that were encouraging, because previously when I would listen to Russ and spoke to him, he said third pairing left side defenseman. And if you listen closely, he felt that Sam was making progress toward being able to play the other side, showing lateral mobility, and now he's got to kind of start it all over again. And hopefully, Sam can establish something here, because he's got a couple years on the contract. But the waiver thing is the tough part for Sam Morin, and I'm sure you're aware of what he faces there.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for him to come back into this lineup. He's obviously going to have a conditioning stint when he comes back sometime, hopefully in the next month. His time is in February at some point. Probably going to be, down for the 2 weeks, whatever it is. We talked about it, 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever. Hopefully he comes back up and looks good and has a chance. Rome wasn't built in a day, so he has a chance to hopefully turn things around and be really good.
Yeah, he's a 2013 draft, so the hour is waning on him. But at least they got into a contract. If they can negotiate the waiver thing, it just depends on how much faith they have on him. But listen, Russ got on a little bit early, to be honest with everybody here, that we just want to be open. And we really wanted to, it allowed us to get into a few more players. And I think we made the right decision. What do you think? To talk about more players instead of talking about the Flyers and their a wonderful loss to St. Louis 3-0.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I
think we're still in that stage. This, where we're looking at the prospects as kind of like a honeymoon stage. Everything. There's so many possibilities. Everything right now, when you look down in the minors, okay, help is coming. We think help is coming. We think we're going to be this better team. We don't have to look at the team we're at now. We can always say wishful thinking.
Yeah. And right now it is at that stage. I guess at closing out for tonight, knowing that there's probably going to be some trade activity ahead, especially with some of these deals, small deals that are made, the waiver move. It just seems inevitable that at least there's going to be some call-ups. Last night, the Flyers did beat the Wild, and if you're still with us and you don't mind hearing about a regular season game with this team, it was kind of a fun game. And Chef, you were down there last night. JVR gets a hat trick. Wayne Simmons improves his trade value with two goals. Nolan Patrick hits, quote, fifth gear after getting having a little discussion with Scott Gordon. And even Carter Hart, not his best night, but he came back and scrambled to help the Flyers to victory last night.
Yeah, the key thing I think the key thing about last night is, and it was touched on it, with the players and, after the game in the locker room and even with Gordon a little bit, is the unsung hero last night, I guess, was kind of almost like Lawton. He was involved in almost everything,
right,
which is good to see. I mean, my biggest bright spot for me personally, because I think I begged for it in maybe not preseason, but at the beginning of the season when we still had Hack as the coach. I'm like thinking, didn't Lindbaum PK for the Phantoms, and he thought he was pretty good at it too. So now I'm looking at Lawton and Lindbaum when they're on the penalty kill, and I'm happy. I mean, they're definitely, I don't know what the numbers are. Before last night's game, they had killed 14 out of 15 before last night's game, I think. So they're getting better a little bit there. In that stretch, they went from 30th in the league to 10th during that stretch there. So there's hope. And with that game last night, one of the huge things that had happened that wasn't happening before was you were getting those momentum stopping goal saves, by Hart. Like, whereas before in the past, we would get that letdown goal and let teams back in it. He made a couple very good saves in the second, late in the second, and all through the third to really keep, the positives going in that game, to keep the momentum toward the Flyers.
Right. And unless Elliott was in goal and a slight run by Anthony Stolarz, the Flyers have not been able to get those momentum saves. And while there's a lot of reasons that the Flyers have had such a bad year and not met expectations, that's got to be number one. When Elliott or Hart was not in the lineup for the most part, they couldn't get a save. So, yeah. So, Dan, the Flyers play Boston tomorrow, and this is really the first big look with Carter Hart with a squad that could be a Stanley Cup finalist. I know they played Nashville, but Nashville didn't have Forsberg, Arvidsson, or Subban when they beat them in Philly. So there's about a dozen games coming up where the Flyers are going to play teams that could be a conference final or a Stanley Cup finalist. What's your feeling about how he should be handled from here on out?
I kind of talked about it on BPW radio last night. I think once Stolarz or Elliott, whoever gets healthy first makes it, they're going to send Hart down. I just wouldn't subject this kid to this team as often as possible. If I were them, I would start McKenna tomorrow and just deal with it. You're probably going to lose. Again, there's no point. You're not fighting for anything this season except last place. I would protect Carter Hart at all costs. There's a lot of people that really like him and really are behind him and think that he's going to, he can probably handle it. But I wouldn't subject him to it just yet.
And I agree. The bottom line for me is, what is the upside versus the risk? And if you look at it like that, when we're 2-3 years down the road, and me following this game so long, I got to tell you, it's not going to hurt him to get pulled from a couple more games. But after that, it's time you're going to start chipping away at his confidence. And I just don't see enough upside. not the worst thing in the world. They don't have to. They're going to show us some kids that are going to be coming up eventually from Lehigh Valley. That's just a matter of time. So, I mean, I really agree with that. And gentlemen, with that, we're going to wrap it up. It's been really, in spite of the fact the Flyers stink, it was a hell of a lot of fun tonight. We're talking with Russ. I'm sorry if I hogged it up, but it's just sure it's so much fun listening about these prospects and better times to come. So the Flyers tomorrow night play Boston, and that's a home game. They go on the road to Montreal, and then there's the All-Star break, I believe. And we're going to come back during that period of time or the week after that. We'll make a decision, and there could be a Flyers trade or something in there. So, Chef, let's get a last word from you about what you're hoping for between now and our next show.
I'm hoping for one or two, possibly three roster moves. I want to see some movement on this team now. You know, like you said, we're fighting for last place. You know, to not be in it, and that's, you know, if that's the case, I'm kind of fine going, knowing that we changed our, you know, our coach, our GM, blah blah blah, and if we're looking to improve, moves got to be made. You can't just sit on your heels here and think that bringing up kids is going to solve a problem, because we just basically in one show told you that leaving Carter Hart out to dry every night is not very good. So why would you want to subject him to any of this without making some moves to like solidify your future? I mean, let's face it. You need to do something now in order to make room for these rosters on the roster for the prospects that you have now, and in that turn need to make room for the prospects that you plan on getting next year if you think we're still going to be that bad.
Yeah, well, you have to cycle these guys through. And Dan, you with a final word. We talked ad nauseum about trades to come and all. I figured I'd give that a rest this week because, you know, between now and the next show, I'd be surprised if something went down anyway. But you got a lot going on, like you were talking about in the beginning of the show. Why don't you just give us a reminder of where we can find you and maybe some final thoughts?
Well, you can find me at Dan the Flyer Fan on Twitter. You can find my site at Brotherly Puck, brotherlypuck.com. Host quite a few podcasts now. Brotherly Pod, which will be the main show with my co-host Garrett, who's the co-founder of Brotherly Puck. I do PPW Radio, which is my solo show, where it's the audio version of Brotherly Puck Weekly, which is a weekly write-up that I do for Brotherly Puck. And I will have a spin-off podcast of that called Might Be Moran. You can find that at Might Be Moran on Twitter. That'll be more of an overall Philadelphia sports experience. Wow.
There's some breaking news for me in there, too. I thought I was kept up in the loop, but Dan, you're a busy man. What can I tell you?
Yep. Dan the busy man.
Dan
Flyer
the busy
fan.
Man.
And it all rhymes, too. How cute.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Just a reminder, the OMB Puckcast is on 5 podcast platforms: iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Podcast, and soon enough with our partners, PhillySportsNetwork.com. We're up on their YouTube page probably sometime late tomorrow afternoon if you like YouTube. The big thing is if you could subscribe to our show, particularly with iTunes, and give us a rating. It really does help the show and moves us along. And we really appreciate your support. And we're going to have, like we talked about in the beginning of the show, some fan interactive activities as well as some merchandise in the future. And maybe even a big announcement about an event of our own coming up soon. So with that, everybody, take care and see you next time.